a stranger with a gun came upon 2 teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You know, we've had people in here on the podcast, and they kind of have a hierarchy of things in their life. And they've said often, if they don't put recovery on top,
right,
then they're going to lose everything below. No, is that right?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, we've had several people say that it's hard to say it out loud because it sounds wrong to say your recovery is above your family or above your friends or above your job. But the reality is that if you don't make recovery number one, then everything else on the list
doesn't matter.
Yeah, it can.
You're going to lose it.
Yeah, exactly.
I would agree, and I guess in my life I see that as I viewed all these external things that I had as things that were keeping me sober when really they were the result of like me being sober.
Oh.
There you go.
And so I thought if I just like did all these external things like working and like playing outside, then I would stay sober. But I basically was looking at it backwards, I think, in terms of sobriety.
Yeah, which is strange because those are things that we all value and we're taught to make a priority in life, right? But I want you to go back and talk a little bit about, you had mentioned like you were future tripping. I think you mentioned something that you felt like kind of a void about, well, is this all there is to my life? Talk about that, because to me that seems like that you got everything going in life, but then was it a lack of meaning, of worrying about the future? What were you talking about there?
Yeah, I associate it with meaning, because there were a lot of like objectively positive things in my life, and I still like went to bed at night like anxious and like unfulfilled.
Now, when I look at you, and I've met your mom and your dad, but you're kind of, I think like your mom, we're kind of a free spirit, a bohemian type, and you're just kind of this, you're more experiences than concrete stuff. I think that's what you like, and it sounds like your life was more focused on concrete stuff and less about the fun and spiritual, but I don't know. That's the way I look at it. I don't know.
Kind of. I think
you can tell me I'm wrong. People do it all the time.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I think even in experiences, like I think there's been a lot of times in my life where I focus too much on experiences. I'm thinking about like outdoor recreation, like skiing or hiking in the mountains. Like I don't know. I have like an interesting relationship with recreation where it's supposed to be this positive thing, but I often use it in an avoidant manner where like if I am in the mountains for 6 hours, that's 6 hours where I don't have to think about anything else.
Talk a little bit about like, have you found like meaning in life is something that, philosophers have debated about for centuries, and we probably always will. And I think it comes down to each of us maybe defining it for ourselves. But when it's not defined for ourselves, when we don't feel like we have a connection to something that's meaningful in our life that drives us, that can be kind of a feeling of insecurity or a feeling of purposelessness. Where are you at with that now? Have you found, because if you're using things like the mountains as avoidance, where are you going for that meaning? What are you doing to find that?
Totally. I guess I haven't found that yet, but I've found what is helpful for me, and being okay with not having found that yet is like achieving a sense of personal accountability that I guess is rooted in like existential theory of that I am basically, it's up to me to create the meaning in my life, and I have basically choices like 24 hours a day of how I can do that. And like one thing that we talked a lot about in treatment is like value driven action and behavior, and that like at any minute, like I am either moving towards or away from my values. And so I've thought a lot about my values. And for me, it's like, this is like really like minute to minute stuff of like, before I go to bed, am I going to read like a trashy detective novel, or am I going to like read something that will like help me personally or like expand my mind a little bit? So it's like on a very small scale, like minute to minute, like am I moving like in a direction or conducting behaviors that are towards things that I value in my life?
I want the listeners to know that we've got Keaton at a very raw stage. He's just 2 days out of rehab.
Out of treatment, yeah.
You know, and to sit down and ask you if you have all the answers is unfair, because I know with me having a little more than a year under my belt, I don't have the answers. And Dr. Matt, do you have all the answers?
No, nobody has all the answers.
And so I think it's very cool of you to go, it's minute by minute. And, I'm still trying to figure that out. My dad told me once, he says, if you want to find out what you want to do in life, it's easier to find out what you don't want to do in life. And by that meaning I don't know exactly what I want to do in my life. I know what I don't want to do. And so I steer away from that. So if you do that under the frame of what Keaton's talking about and going, am I moving me closer to my goal? Now, I don't know exactly what that goal is, but I just know this is moving me towards that. And if I do this is taking me away from it. And so I think it's a brilliant way to live your life. And yeah, sometimes it's minute by minute, sometimes it's day by day, sometimes it's month by month. But if you use that frame, I think there's a lot of positivity that can come out of it.
100%. And I guess when I describe it as minute by minute, like to me that implies like a lot of work, like a lot of awareness and noticing and paying attention, which I think it is at this moment. But I guess I'm seeing also like a bigger picture of like turning that mindset into more of a habit, and where it's not like so much effort all the time. And I do kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel, and it's things like, I don't know, my first day out of treatment where I'm used to like waking up and having to be somewhere, or like meditating in the morning because I'm told to, like waking up and not just like playing on my phone or sitting in my bed, like taking the effort to meditate when I wake up, and then like make a plan for my day. That stuff still seems foreign to me, but I recognize that if I continue to do that and turn it into more of a habit, that it will
become easier.
And it just based on that treatment stay, like those little moments of awareness and like active input on my life like are a little easier.
I think kind of back to your comment, Casey, about like, do we have all the answers? Is it fair to talk about that? I would say that's actually part of the therapeutic process, is being challenged, forcing ourselves to think about, well, what is the meaning in my life? And you shared your dad's philosophy, which is a good one. A lot of times people don't know where to go because there are two different ways to kind of move through life. One is, I see this goal and I'm just going to head straight at that. That's my goal. That's what I want to do. Other times, and maybe more applicable to our lives, is the steering away from things that we know we don't want. And we say, well, I may not know exactly what my end-all, be-all goal is in some area of my life, but I know I don't want to end up here or there. And that's a great philosophy, but you don't start thinking in those terms if no one challenges you with those questions and asks you, And I think that's part of what treatment is you're there and people are challenging you and questioning you and giving you tasks to do to try to develop insight. But now you're home, you're on your own. How are you going to keep that going? Like, how are you going to keep that self analysis going?
Yeah, for me, it's easy for me to admit that I do need external accountability at this point.
What are you doing to get that?
And let me tell you. I am so the main thing for me is other people, which means at the moment, like, I'm reconnecting with, like, my support system. It's super, super important to me to have people to talk to on a daily basis, people that expect to hear from me. And then in terms of more like structured support, I'm doing an outpatient program 3 nights a week for 3 hours. That's important. You
didn't do that the first time out.
I did a joke of a program.
But you found you a better program.
Yeah.
And so you're doing that.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say it was a joke of a program. Well, the program was a joke, but the people in it were pretty cool. And I met a lot of good connections there. But I didn't take much from the actual structure of the program. Yeah. And then, like 12-step meetings are a big part of my life. And I got to get, that's on my to-do list today, is to get a therapist. I think that's super important for me as well.
What are some of if we take Casey's dad's philosophy, what are some of the things you want to steer clear of as you're heading on this path? Like, you may not know exactly what the end-all goal is, but what do you know you want to avoid?
That's an interesting question for me, because I think I have a kind of flawed thinking process where I want to avoid things that I shouldn't. So in a more abstract way, I guess what I would definitely want to avoid is isolation. I want to avoid creating like situations of, I guess suffering is the right word, of like personal suffering for myself. And I don't know, I guess at this moment for me, it's more helpful to think about the things I want to move towards than the things I want to avoid.
Yeah. What are some of those then?
Yeah, it's like connection with other people, like feeding my own sense of curiosity in terms of just knowledge. I'm interested in so many things. Playing music, in connection that also definitely includes my family. Like being close with my family is very important to me. Like physical exercise is very important to me. I know I feel so much better when, particularly like endurance exercise, where I'm pushing myself for long periods of time. Honesty, integrity, like acting in ways that move me towards what I consider like positive values.
Hey, you're listening to Project Recovery. More with Keaton. Coming back.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Do you think you have well, maybe you answered this already. I mean, I get the sense, Keaton, that you have a lot that you think about.
Yep.
It's the application that is harder for you, and I would say that's probably a pretty human trait. I can relate to that, where you think, we're good at analyzing, but
overthinking.
Yeah, maybe overthinking, but sometimes it's just we're analyzing things well. There's an interesting process that can happen in our brains when we can get kind of a dopamine response because we can visualize ourselves doing things. So, if you have a goal and you visualize yourself achieving that goal, then there's a dopamine response of reward that comes. And then sometimes that's enough to satiate us and we don't actually enact the behavior. So we never actually achieve the goal. That happens to lots and lots of people. But it sounds like you have a few things at least on your list that are behaviors. So it's not just the thought of wanting to have integrity and those sorts of things and wanting to have connection, but you have some behaviors that you're doing on a regular basis. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I would say that like getting stuck in my own head is probably my biggest problem, and and that results in not taking action, which is the physical manifestation of that problem. So yeah, for me, all of that has to be, all of those like values and goals or whatever have to be tied to action, and it's not. It can be on like a very small scale, like in terms of like connection and honesty and integrity. Maybe that's calling someone who I haven't checked in with in a while and talking to them honestly. And that's like, I'm using that example because getting out of treatment, that's something I've been doing a bunch in the past few days, is like reconnecting with people that are important to me. And that like the action part of that is like actually doing that and not just like thinking about my friends or people that I respect. It's actually like contacting them. And some of that has been a little uncomfortable because going back to like relapsing, it's easy to get stuck in my own head about like what they will think about it. Like, oh, you're just another chronic relapser. Like, oh, you failed. But what I've actually found when I actually have taken the action to talk to people, no one thinks that way, and everyone is there to support me, and it in turn makes me feel a lot better about myself, because I'm not relying on my ideas of what I think other people are thinking. I'm taking action and getting the reality from them, and that's been immensely helpful.
And I think that's kind of why I wanted you to come in today and talk and share your story, is because the reality is relapses happen.
And Keaton's well-spoken. You do a great job describing and talking about your thought process, and I think that's helpful for other people because so many of us aren't very articulate, and so I think Keaton's putting some words to the process of what it's like to have a relapse.
But I mean, after this relapse, it seems like your friends and loved ones were more accepting and proud of you that you went back and took care of it and got back on the road again. Your parents, you said, after 4 rehabs, it sounds like this is the one they took the best.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah, it's never good, but yeah.
It's a hard thing for everybody to deal with. But if we can understand and educate those around that this is something that can and does happen, and it doesn't mean that they're going to go back to it. Some people will, but it's the ugly reality of the addiction, and sometimes it will. I mean, I've talked to people who've had 10 years of sobriety under their belt and then relapse.
Yeah. Sure.
And then we're cognizant enough to go back and after a couple of days get back on the path. I mean, that's the thing that, and I don't know how to frame it. I'm not as eloquent as Keaton, but to somebody who's on a diet and lost a ton of weight and say, hey, you can never ever ever have cake again for the rest of your life. And then all of a sudden, 10 years out, they have a piece of cake and all these emotions start flooding back. To tell somebody that, you're never going to do this again and they have to live by that, that's a ton of pressure. And so that's why I say I take it 24 hours. I take it at small bites and I keep moving forward because that's how I process it in my head. And that, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I think, part of that is external voices have to eventually become an internal voice. And what that means is that when you go through, detox and rehab, and you're getting treatment, you're going to meetings, you're getting all these external voices, and some of them may say things like, you can never have a piece of cake again. But eventually, all of those messages you have to decide what your internal voice is. What are you going to filter out and synthesize, and what are you going to get rid of? What are you going to accept? Because in the end, it's up to that person whether or not they have that piece of cake or not. And
right.
And when you're relying solely on other people's opinions about your sobriety, I think that's where you run the risk of that all or nothing experience. So, in behavior change science, we need to avoid that, because otherwise somebody's like, well, I had a piece of cake, I guess I'm off the wagon, might as well eat the whole cake.
Yeah.
And then, they're back to gaining all their weight back.
If I'm going to write a bad check, I'm going to write a big bad check.
Right, exactly. And I think in recovery, we see that a lot, where people, they feel so much humiliation, shame, embarrassment. They feel like, well, might as well just, go all out.
Because they don't want to have the uncomfortable call that Keaton was talking about, of calling some loved ones and wondering what they were thinking and doing that. And so it's easier just to stay numb than it's...
Right. I think one of maybe my last question for you today, Keaton, is, this is, and you've probably answered this in a few different ways today, but like big picture, if now that you're out, you've done your 54 days, you're starting to do life on a little more on your own than you were when you were in recovery, but in treatment. What are you getting out of this experience that you didn't have before? Like, what's different now for you?
Yeah, I'd say what's different is, well, first off, just like the extreme humbling experience of relapsing, and like realizing kind of the lack of awareness and attention and participation that I was showing in my own life, by resetting and having that treatment experience. Like right now, I feel like I am more actively engaged in my life than I have been. And I think that the difference, and this hopefully will be the difference, is like turning these small behaviors into habits, in terms of meditating, of communicating honestly, of reaching out, of taking care of myself physically. There's just so many actions that I have not taken in the past, or have taken only in times of crisis, that I need to integrate into my daily life. And I having been in treatment before, and like the feeling of getting out and like having all these tools at my disposal, I also know what it's like to lose those like months down the line. So the difference for me, I think, has to be the action I take in my life on a daily basis.
There you go. Hey, Keaton, thank you very much. And I know this was a hard thing for you to come and do, and I'm so proud that you'd come back and talk on the podcast and share your life and let people know that relapse is a part of the road to recovery. Not for everybody, but for many. And the fact that you'd come back here and share your story, I think is going to help a lot of people. Cool. Thank you very much. Dr. Matt?
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a shame when people feel like they have to have everything just right or perfect before they get involved in some sort of cause, because none of us are perfect. And, I just admire Keaton for his willingness to come in and be honest about it. And I'm sure there are people listening to the show that are right where Keaton is, and I think that's one of the powerful things about communicating. You mentioned connecting, Keaton, as an important part of your recovery, and I think that's an important part of life, is finding the meaning of life almost always comes down to we're connected to something important, and that usually means other people. So thank you for bringing that to our show today.
And this is going to make my girlfriend mad, but perfection isn't possible.
It isn't. I literally say in session all the time with people, perfect is a stupid goal. It's a goal. Because
now my girlfriend hates you
because it sets you up to fail. Because it's a stupid goal because it's not a goal you can achieve. So perfect, we don't try to be perfect. We set realistic goals, things that are achievable. We don't want to always be chasing perfect and never be able to reach it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to Project Recovery. If you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. This is Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. That's my good friend Keaton over there. Josh is running the board.
Now I'm worried that your girlfriend doesn't like me.
Yeah.
I'm going to worry about that the rest of the day.
Leslie loves everybody. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.